In this video, I'm gonna show how I made over $4,000 in 1 month with a woodworking side hustle business. Kind piece carpentry is something I run on the side. I have a full-time day job working 9 to 5. This is something I do primarily on the weekends. If you enjoy woodworking and you have a couple tools already and you're considering acquiring more tools and actually diving in and starting a little side hustle woodworking business, and you're curious how much money could you actually make in a month doing it, you're probably gonna be interested in this video. This video is gonna run through 9 orders, what I sold them for, and it's really gonna show the variety of work that my business does.
All right, first project I'm working on for the month of October was a custom range hood that a custom home builder wanted me to make. He sent me a link to the general design that he wanted and gave me some rough sketches with measurements. So first step was getting a digital 3D version built so I could figure out the joints I was going to use. This is going to be a painted piece, so I'm using imported 18 mil birch ply for this build. It's light. The hardest part is really understanding how this is going to have to mount to the wall, because him and his crew are installing it and they're painting it, so I'm just building it. So I need to build it to very exact specs, and just a lot of back and forth with the customer to make sure I'm capturing all the details correctly. So gluing these up for the base that's going to mount to the wall. While those are drying, I'm moving on to the second project, which is a request from a guy I train with. He wanted he's got this cast iron pan and he wanted 2 circular cutting boards to fit inside, and he wanted a knife to be inset into that cutting board so that he can take it camping and it doesn't take up as much space. So here designing it, trying to figure out the best way to go about it. How big can I make these with still having enough room for the knives? And he wanted 2 of them, and there were 2 different knives. So some quick CNC work, cutting out the circular cutting boards. This is on teak, which is great for cutting boards. It has a naturally high oil content. I use it a lot for some of the basic cutting boards that I do. I programmed the CNC to leave about an 1/8 inch piece on the bottom, and then I just need to come through with a flush trim router to remove it. And there you go. Big piece just blew off, so that was a mild setback. Luckily, I was able to recover it. And if it's a clean break like this, a little bit of wood glue and then just some added time to let it dry. So taking it over the vise, getting this glued up, but pretty frustrating because it was the last piece and I could have moved on to the next part of the process, but now I need to take at least an hour and let that set. So while that's gluing up, I'm moving back to the first project of the custom range hood, getting all the clamps off, and then cleaning up one edge on the joiner to get rid of excessive glue squeeze out, and those edges of the plywood aren't perfect, so I deliberately milled it a little bit larger. He needed the width of the base to be a very specific thickness because we had to account for the size of the hardware that was getting mounted up from the bottom, and it also needed to fit in the space to account for the trim and everything else going around it. So with the 2 3/4 inch pieces of plywood, you know, that's 1.5 inches. So instead of doing a whole bunch of passes on the planer to bring it down, I trimmed some off with the bandsaw and then just did a few passes on the planer to get it down to its final thickness. Now I'm cutting it everything down to its exact final lengths. And then to assemble this, I was thinking about doing box joints or rabbet joints, just so it would be strongest, but ultimately decided on just using pocket holes. So I had to do some guess and check because this is not a standard thickness, and I only had like 2.5 inch pocket hole screws available. So I just had to do some guess and check to figure out the correct positioning of the jig, and then had pocket holes going in from both directions. Now I'm working on the actual inset for the knives themselves. You can see the 2 different ones there. Took some pictures and converted them into a vector, and then just doing some design work. The things I'm focused on here is I want it to be a pretty close match to the exact knife so it looks good and it looks deliberate and custom, but also I need to create some spaces that will enable your thumb and index finger to grab the knife and pull it out. I plan on using magnets to hold it, so once it's secured by those magnets, you need to be able to get in there and yank it off. While that was cutting on the CNC, I was back to working on the range hood. Once the CNC was done, I'm out, turning it off, Back to working on the range hood to get that top piece custom fit. There's very specific angles I need to cut in it to match the back slant of the sides. So I'm just dialing in those angles here, just taking off like a 1/16 inch by a 1/16 inch till it fits, moving it back up to 90, and then these 90-degree braces I'm cutting are for the inside. So this was another design aspect I had to be pretty deliberate about, as I needed to know the actual dimensions of the hardware that's getting mounted inside of it, because if I build those braces and they block the ventilation going up through the center, well then that's no good, because once they're in, they're not coming out. So again, just a lot of design work. Over half the time of this piece was just design work and design considerations until I was comfortable with it. Make something that would be light enough that him and his crew could move around, but strong enough that it's not going to break during the process. So glue, brad nails holding it together, screws on the bottom, the pocket screws, filling all the holes, getting everything sanded really nice, because I know it's going to be painted, and making it as easy as possible for the painters. While that's all drying, back over to the circular cutting boards, doing some sanding in the grooves, and then a 45-degree chamfer around the perimeters on the top and bottom. Again, hand sanding in those grooves there. And this teak sands up really nice. The X-carve isn't the greatest CNC, so there are a lot of tool marks left behind. Those vinyl, they're not vinyl, what are they? They're plastic, nylon bristle brushes do a really good job of getting in the nooks and crannies. And speaking of CNCs, I am buying a new one. Well, I have bought a new one. It just hasn't arrived yet. I bought the Alt Mill 4x4. So if you're a CNC guy and you're interested in that and how I plan on using that in my business moving forward, stay tuned, because there's going to be a bunch of videos coming out specifically for CNC guys and specific to the Alt Mill. Back over working on 2 more orders. I had 2 flags I needed to do. One was a classic 3-foot flag that I do, and it's just going to have some specific Marine unit logos and a custom write-up plaque on it. The other is a 4-foot exterior flag that the customer wanted for one of his friends that has a homestead. So because it's going to be exterior, there's some other considerations I need to go into with that. Exterior grade finish, waterproof glue, and then the sign itself, the carving, is going to be made out of PVC plastic and painted. That way it'll hold up out in the elements, whereas the 3-foot flag is going to be an interior one. So I'm just going through my normal process there. I have a lot of pet peeves when it comes to flags. There's a lot of idiots out there that make really shitty looking flags, and I don't appreciate it, because it's an American flag and there should be some pride in it. For example, the stars need to match the stripes. There's only 3 colors on the American flag: red, white, and blue. So if you have white stars and brown burnt white stripes, guess what? It's not an American flag. You're just making shit up. So this is the process that I use. I also hate how they burn the crap out of the white stripes. It doesn't look good. They don't have good burning techniques. It looks blotchy, because that's how pine burns. Pine burns really blotchy. So for a long time, I've put off making flags because they're kind of a basic project, until I finally got so tired of seeing the terrible flags that other people make and was determined to make nicer ones. So that's how I got into flag making. Normally, I would have the blue Union part already CNC'd, but because I didn't, I also didn't want to wait to CNC this, so I glued it up in a way with the back supports to where I did not add glue or brad nails to the pieces that would hold the Union on. That's why you see it's a separate piece there. So this one is the 4x4. Because it's exterior and it's going to be exposed to the elements, I put extra bracing on there. Once those were assembled, I took both the Unions and brought them over to the CNC, carved the stars out. Now I'm just going in and attaching the Union on both of them. Now just putting the final touches on these 2 cutting boards, ensuring proper fit with the magnets, getting the rubber feet on the bottoms of them, doing one final wipe down and fit check, and this project is done. I'll bring them in the next morning to the guy I train with. And this order was $220, so there you go, October 4th, $220 in the pocket. Moving on to the second flag, getting the Union glued on there, just like I did for the other one. Pro tip for those out there building flags like this: you do not need to add glue in between each individual stripe. You just clamp it, put your back supports on there, glue those, and brad nail those in place. Here I'm trimming up the edges, and I want to have the blade of that saw as high as possible so the downward force of the blade helps prevent blowout. It still happens sometimes, so I'll go in and touch up where some of the stain came off, but that's how I clean up the edges. Then I applied 2 coats of exterior spar urethane to that. While that's drying outside, I'm working on the other part of the 3-foot flag, which is going to be some custom logos and a laser engraved plaque for the guy that's retiring. I don't know if he's retiring or just leaving the unit. Doesn't matter. But this is sapele wood. Ripped it or resawed it in half. So it's the same piece, using the CNC to cut out the outline of what the logo is going to be. Then I'm going to take that outline and put it on the laser, and I'll laser engrave the logo to capture all the detail. Concurrently, I'm working on the write-up there. I'm just getting my spacing. None of this is clear coated yet. I'm going to mount the write-up and the logo on there before I clear coat it. Making sure it's centered, gluing it down. When you have thin pieces of wood like this, they never remain perfectly flat. So I want some good glue contact, but not enough to have a bunch of squeeze out. So once that glue sets outside, using clear high gloss lacquer. Lacquer's great, it dries very quickly, and as you can see, I do a high volume of orders like this in a condensed timeline, so I need a finish that dries very quickly. This one is done, $300, October 5th. This next order I took on was pretty annoying. It's my own fault. I shouldn't have taken on, but this was a guy that reached out on Facebook Marketplace to one of the postings I had for custom wood stuff, and he had made this flag, and he wanted it into a concealed carry gun box with pistons and RFID things, and he didn't feel like doing it, so wanted me to pick up. We'll talk more about that later. This is a custom cutting board for another guy I trained with for his wedding, so it's going to be made out of that same teak material that I used for the circular cutting boards with the knife inlay and the cast iron. So just programming in the juice grooves, and it's got a unique shape to it. It's not just a rectangle, there's some curves there, and then using a 60-degree V-cut bit to carve those, cleaning it up. And the plan here is I'm going to mix up some epoxy and pour it in there, let it set overnight. I got this vacuum pump in this chamber to use for my vacuum press, and this is the first time I'm using it to pull some of the bubbles out of the epoxy. And while it doesn't look like too much is going on here, you can definitely see it's doing something. I will say that there were noticeably less bubbles when I was pouring it. Like when I was sucking it in with the syringe and putting them in there, it just went in really clean. So I always let this set 24 hours, so whenever I'm doing an epoxy pour, I try to get it done at night, hitting it with the blowtorch to pull any remaining surface bubbles out of there, and then just letting this sit. On to another project. This is back to the 4-foot flag. This is going to be the logo and the text that's going to be on the sign mounted to the front of the flag. Like I stated earlier, this isn't external. It's going to be outside, so making it out of PVC. So I painted the PVC black, let it dry, then I'm running it on the CNC machine. The first pass was an upcut bit because I wanted a clear bottom. The second pass is an 1/8 inch downcut, and you can see how that downcut bit is pulling all those little fuzzies down, and it's leaving me with a nice clean line. While that's running, this epoxy has set. I'm coming out, cutting it out with the jigsaw. This is now done on the CNC, using a flush trim bit to clean up the edges, coming in and hand sanding any of the other frillies. Exterior sign, so I'm using silicone to mount it versus glue. Silicone is very sticky, does a good job, then just a couple pin nails, and boom, that guy's done. $500, October 10th. Order number 3. Continuing on with the Sickles cutting board, epoxy set, so just running it through the drum sander. I've got 80 grit on the belt now, and then I got it down most of the way right before it started hitting the wood, and then I put like 180 grit on there and started running it through, and then just cleaning it up with a hand sander. I didn't want to go all the way with the 80 grit because that's going to put some permanent lines in there and not look as nice. So I'm just getting it as close as I can, sanding it up using a handmade oil beeswax finish, and that guy is done. $200, order number 4. Back to the concealed gun case with the pistons and the RFID, making some progress on that, getting the piano hinges mounted. Again, I was very annoyed the entire time with this one. It's not the guy's fault. I was frustrated with myself for taking it on. Never again will I take on a project where someone else starts it and they want me to finish it. the hours that it took me to complete this one from start to finish, and all the variables like guess and check on the pistons, the staining, the clear coating, measuring the flags, all, inlaying the back, this was not a profitable one for me. Back to the range hood, I had to put a pause on it because I had to wait for the builder to bring me white oak that I had to mill up to make the face frame for it. So now that's done and that's ready for pickup. October 11th, working on the next one. This could be a custom logo for a marine unit. I've got all this rough cut sapele, and I'm just cutting it to rough length, finding pieces with good enough grain that are straight, minimal twist and cupping in them, and then getting those milled up, doing a pass on the joiner. Then I'll run them through the planer to make the two faces parallel. Then I'll clean up an edge and take it over to the table saw. Just normal milling process, but just back and forth from the joiner to the planer to the table saw. Then I'll get it laid out on the table and figure out the orientation I want for each board. Then I'll label them at the bottom so I know their order, and I have it marked, in, out on those edges, and I'll take them back to the joiner and hit those so when they're glued up, they're perfect. On to the next project. This is gonna be a high-end whiskey cabinet that a customer wants. This one needs to ship as well, which makes the design problematic. I need to keep shipping in mind. So using sapele for this, same thing, joiner, planer, back and forth, getting the rough stock milled up, and then you just gotta start laying the pieces out. It can be overwhelming when you have a complex project like this, but I just keep telling myself, go. Just execute, execute, execute. Every time I just wanna chill and not be in the garage. Just push to get it done, because the fastest way to get anything done is just to do it. Using miter joints for the corners here, this is gonna have a miter door frame, miter box frame, some removable shelves, and a cigar humidor. So this is Spanish cedar that I've milled up, and it's nice and clean, and I'm gonna use my vacuum press to glue it to the sapele. And then you'll see how I make the actual humidor. That way I don't have free floating cedar on the inside. It's actually vacuum pressed to the sapele. So that'll make for a real nice Spanish cedar lined humidor. This is the humidor here I'm working on. It's gonna sit in the bottom part of the whiskey cabinet. So it needs to be made to size to fit under the bottom shelf. The lid, I'm making it a lot more complex than I had to. I probably won't do this again in the future, but I wanted to have some rabbets there so it would fit, and the top and bottom would have that cedar right there, and I wouldn't have to insert it later. Took a lot more time than I wanted it to, so lesson learned for me, won't be doing that again, but that's the value of trying new techniques and stuff. You learn what works, what doesn't. If this was a box for me personally, maybe I would do it, but something for a customer that I'm making money on and time is money, probably not, because they wouldn't know any different. Then once the top and bottom are glued on, you run it over the table saw. You want to get it really close to all the way through, and then use a hand saw to just trim off the extra. Running it through the drum sander to just clean up the little lip that was left from the table saw, not cutting through all the way. And then you got a nice clean top. Putting that aside, trying to make progress on this dang gun cabinet. It's already clear coated, so all I need to do now is get those pistons refit, get the RFID fit, make sure it opens and closes as intended, get the back put on, and then it'll be done, ready for pickup from the customer. And this one is done, ready for customer pickup. $250, order number 5 complete, October 13th, almost halfway through the month. So we're just gonna keep pushing, continue working on this large whiskey cabinet / humidor. I've done these woven door fronts in the past, took a lot of guess and check. I used my old files from the CNC, but had to modify them slightly because this is a larger size. This still takes a lot of guess and check. So people often ask how I make those doors. They assume that it's steam bent. Steam bending would take a lot of time. I'd have to build custom jigs and a steam box. What I land on is actually just cutting these squigglies out on the CNC. Checking here, just making sure my tolerances are good and I can assemble it by hand after it's all cleaned up. Builder came to pick up the range hood, $800. Order number 6, October 16th. Early morning, doing some programming work for the CNC to cut out the mortises that are gonna be on all 4 sides of the door, and that the spokes to the woven pieces are gonna fit into, so they're free floating. This took a lot of guess and check as well. While those are cutting, I've got the door laid out and taped down so I can measure what my offset's going to be, planning for them to sit a 1/2 inch inside the doors. So I need enough to have them free floating, but they can't bottom out or else the door's not going to assemble. The miter joints aren't going to close. Took about an hour to get in there and hand sand all the curves on these and on my last one. Story of my life. Tried to fix it, but there was no way to repair it. I had to waste a whole lot of wood, an entire board, just to CNC out another one. So made a replacement, just continued pushing, moving on, getting it final assembly and getting ready to glue the door together with those spokes permanently inset in between. I hate hinges, I hate hinges, I hate hinges. I hate installing hinges on boxes. It takes so much time. It's such a process to get it done correctly. I ordered some stop hinges on Amazon and they were crap. They were inconsistent, so I used some other brass hinges I just got from Ace, but I did some unique inlay methods to where it bottoms itself out so it holds the door open. Now moving on to final sanding for the whiskey cabinet humidor. Again, this is Sapile. Going through, sanding, getting the miters glued up. I love using those spring clamps to kind of hold things in place, but I didn't want excessive little dimple holes put in it, so I just used 2 of them to hold it in place. Got that ratchet strap on there, using some spray adhesive for the back and some fake leather. I use this method all the time for my whiskey cabinets. It adds a really nice accent and it's pretty easy to do. You got a thin piece of plywood, that fake leather, spray adhesive, put it on, dries instantly, cut the excess off, you're good to go, and it looks really nice. Having to drill that hole in the bottom so that when it's mounted to the wall, you can get your finger up in from the bottom and you can push out the humidor because there's no pull tab or anything on the humidor. This random shape that's going to be mounted to the top is actually a combination of the state of Virginia and Wisconsin. This was a request from the customer. He wanted a unique way to incorporate both of those state profiles. So that's what that is. Giving it a nice chamfer, doing some final assembly on these hinges. I do like the hinges I used on here. They kind of inset into each other, so you don't need to, cut an inset for them. So I will definitely use those in the future. This is going to be held on the wall with a French cleat, so you can see the one piece of the French cleats mounted to the back there. Getting everything assembled, one final check, and there it is before finish. I've got a little magnet in there that holds the door shut, and then I'm using just clear Danish oil, using a paintbrush to get in all the nooks and crannies, then wiping that Danish oil on. I really like using Danish oil. I don't use tung oil, really. I don't use linseed oil because that'll burn your shop down. Danish oil goes on real nice, sets pretty quickly, nice hand-rubbed matte finish. This one is done, $1,150. Now, I gotta go on to the packaging because this is shipping. Me packaging this thing took about 2 hours to do. So when you're doing orders that ship, you gotta keep that in mind. All right, this was fresh off the CNC, going in, cleaning it up, 45-degree chamfer on this piece, light sanding on the back and on the edges. This I need to spray paint black. So, and I know I need to sand off the excess, so I'm not going too crazy on the surface sanding because I'm just gonna have to do it again, making sure there's good coverage there with the spray paint. While that's drying, I move on to the next order, which is gonna be a custom metal award display shelf. So it's gonna be a basic shelf with a bunch of hooks on it so the customer can hang ribbons and medals and stuff on it. The guy that it's for is a cop, or a retired cop. I don't remember if he was still on the force or not, but they wanted to incorporate the last name with a thin blue line, so I CNC'd that out, fill in the name with black epoxy, fill in the line with blue epoxy, give that a day to set overnight, then I'm out sanding it off, cleaning it up. I've got the core bowls that I'm gonna just glue on in place at the appropriate spacing, and then once that glue sets, I'm gonna go reinforce with brad nails, and the top's gonna get attached the same way. That glue's drying. I'm working on the sanding off all the spray paint. This is kind of a pain in the butt, but there's no way around it. I wanted to add an extra dynamic layer here to the design, so I thought it would look cool if I could burn in some depth using like a whip shading method that's common in like tattooing and watercoloring. And it was a huge mistake. I realized it was gonna look like shit, so I stopped, sanded it all off before I wasted any more time. I had like an hour into it. Had to take a break, was pretty frustrated, so I come back, putting the final touches on the shelf by filling the holes, final sanding. Then I came back inside, worked late night, hand painting in order to achieve the shading gradient that I was looking for. I was just watering it down to make it darker or lighter, and then painted the whole thing, give it some depth. Turned out pretty good. Customers were very happy with it. I had these timed so they'd both be done the same day, and I timed it with the weather. I always want to spray my lacquer on a nice sunny day so it sets. If there's too much humidity in the air, the lacquer doesn't set right. So that's another constraint with using lacquer, but lacquer looks really good, dries quick. So both these projects are just about done. There we go, $400 on that one, and that's order number 8. The final piece for the custom shelf is just getting the spacing laid out and all the holes pre-drilled so I can mount the hooks. The customer wanted between 30 and 40. I did more than 40, but I also apparently can't do math, so I didn't order enough hooks on Amazon. So for the sake of this video, I'm calling this project done. I just need to wait for the other hooks to arrive. The holes are pre-drilled. I just need to attach them, then customer can pick it up. Here you go, $250, order number 9. That closes out the month. I have 6 other orders on the books I need to start, but with Halloween coming up at the end of the month, I knew I wasn't going to sneak them in. So we are calling this complete. Month of October, 9 custom orders, gross profit $4,070. If you're wondering what my net is, you can keep wondering. That's between me and my tools, but I can tell you my margins are pretty good. So hopefully this video was helpful to show you how a guy with a full-time 9-to-5 job can have a woodworking side hustle and make some solid extra money. Let me know if you guys have questions. Happy to answer. Thanks for watching.